Are you looking to gain some new skills that will help you stand out? If so, then here are 5 non-coding skills that you need as a software developer. Docker is a tool for creating, distributing, and running containerized applications. As a software developer, this benefits you as it allows you to package and distribute your applications in a consistent manner, allowing them to run on any system or cloud platform without any issues. Before you can run your application in Docker, you must first create a Docker image, which involves creating a Docker file in your application. The Docker file is a text file which includes instructions for building the Docker image. These instructions include copying and downloading the application code, the libraries, and runtime required to run the application. Once your Docker image has been defined, you can build and run a Docker container based on that image. To do this, use the Docker Engine, which is a service that runs on a host machine and communicates with the Docker client. Finally, a Docker container is a running instance of your application inside a containerized environment. It is isolated from the host system and other containers, allowing multiple containers to run concurrently on a single host without interfering with one another. Overall, Docker is a popular choice for development, testing, and production environments, as it provides a convenient and efficient way to package and distribute applications. It does come with the disadvantage of no longer being able to use the excuse of, "this code worked on my machine." To be successful in creating Docker containers, you'll also need to know this next skill. Although Windows and macOS by far have the most users for laptops and desktop computers, Linux is what you'll most likely be using when you run your application on a server. If you've never used Linux before, using the command line may seem intimidating, but once you get started, you realize it's not as difficult as you thought. As a software developer, most of your learning will come from searching online for how to do something. The same is true for Linux. You can search for how to do something, and more than likely someone has already asked the same question, and there will be a command ready for you to copy and paste. Just make sure you don't copy and paste this command. If you're deploying your application to a Linux server, you should probably also know how communication with it works. If you want at least one other person to use your newly developed application, then you need to understand some basic computer networking skills. I'm not going to go too in-depth with the things you need to learn, but here are a list of networking topics that I believe are beneficial for you as a software developer. IP addresses, ports, domain names, DNS, TCP and UDP, OSI model, HTTP and HTTPS, and TLS. If you're enjoying the video so far, give a like and subscribe. Also, if you'd like me to create a video that introduces you to any of these networking topics, let me know in the comments below. If the application you're developing needs to be accessed over the internet, it's usually not a good idea to allow them to be directly accessible. A web server is software which is exposed to the internet and handles the HTTP requests which are being sent to your application. When developing a web application with a framework such as Node.js or Django, you might find that when you change the settings so it runs in production instead of development, things such as your JavaScript, CSS, or image files are now no longer accessible. This is because when it's in development mode, your web framework will create its own mini web server so you can test your application. The problem is, it's not very secure, which is why when you turn it into production mode, it will disable the web server. With the web server no longer present, there is now nothing to serve the files. This is why you need to learn how to use a web server if you want your application to be internet accessible. The two most commonly used web servers are Nginx and Apache. I personally use Nginx. The way this setup works is you have your application and its files on your Linux server. Your application will then run on the server and listen on one of its locally accessible ports. You then run the web server and have it listen on the external ports 80 and 443. Port 80 is HTTP and port 443 is HTTPS. It will be configured so if it receives an HTTP request of a certain path, it will then respond with the file being requested. If the HTTP request it receives is not for a file, the web server acts as a web proxy, passing the request to the web application, which then performs the request, sending the response to the web server, which then sends the response back to the user. The final skill you need is the least technical, but arguably the most important. The way you communicate with other people may be the most important thing that defines whether you get ahead in software development or not. If you are new to software development and are looking for a junior position, the primary thing that the interviewer is looking at is who you are as a person. They don't have the expectation that you know every technology they use, although they do expect you to have some skill. What they care about is whether you have a personality fit for the team, or whether you have an open mind and eagerness to learn. The software team can teach you the programming languages or frameworks that you don't know, but they can't teach you to be a likable person who is willing to learn. If you are moving up the ladder into a team lead or managerial role, soft skills are even more important now, as your job is no longer about your technical abilities, but whether you can lead the people in your team to successfully complete projects. Being a successful team lead involves gaining the respect of your team members. This means getting rid of your ego, setting aside your personal issues, and taking responsibility for everyone in your team. If someone makes a mistake, you don't blame them for making the mistake, you blame yourself for allowing the mistake to be possible. If someone forgets how to do something, you don't blame them for forgetting, you create documentation so the team has a place to go to remember what they have forgotten. Most importantly, if someone is having an issue and brings it up with you, don't disagree or argue with them. Listen, show empathy, and genuinely try to understand what it is and try to help them in solving it. Your job as a team lead doesn't involve letting your personal issues get in the way or belittling your team. It involves elevating everyone so they can successfully perform their role within the team. The stereotype of a software developer having bad social skills is pretty true. If you work on improving your soft skills, you will jump ahead and gain new opportunities far quicker than those who don't have soft skills. Those are the top 5 non-coding skills that I think every software developer needs. To summarize this list, Docker is needed so you can consistently run your applications. Linux is needed so you can interact with and configure your application's server environment. Networking is needed so you can understand how applications communicate over the internet. Web servers are needed so you can handle the communication of your application. And finally, soft skills are needed so the people you work with can respect you. This list was not ordered by the importance of the skills, but I just thought that ordering it this way made sense. If there are any other non-coding skills that you think a software developer needs, make sure to let me know below.